The operation to disable the Vorthek weapon was a race against time. Engineers and scientists worked tirelessly, analyzing every detail of the device's structure. It was a marvel of alien technology, complex, intricate, and deadly. One wrong move could trigger its activation, wiping out Earth in an instant. Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah stayed close to the mission, providing guidance and support as humanity's best minds tackled the problem. Laura spent hours deciphering symbols etched into the weapon's surface, her expertise in xenolanguages proving invaluable. "These markings are warnings," she explained during a briefing. "They describe self-destruct protocols. If we tamper with the wrong part, it'll detonate." Sarah nodded, pointing at a schematic on the screen. "So we need to focus on the core, the central mechanism that powers it. Disable that, and the rest should shut down." Benjamin listened intently, his expression grim. "How long will it take?" "At least 72 hours, one of the lead engineers replied. "Maybe longer. This isn't something we can rush." As the team worked, news of the discovery spread cautiously among world leaders. Governments agreed to keep the weapon's existence classified, fearing mass panic if the public learned about the lingering threat. Instead, they focused on rallying global cooperation, ensuring every nation contributed resources to the effort. Meanwhile, observatories continued monitoring the remnants of the Vorthek fleet. Reports indicated that Zorith's loyalists were regrouping, possibly seeking allies among rival species. The rebels, now calling themselves the Free Dominion, had vanished entirely, leaving no trace of their whereabouts. Humanity's victory felt fragile, overshadowed by the looming uncertainty of what might come next. By the third day, progress on disabling the weapon reached a critical stage. Technicians carefully dismantled sections of the device, isolating the power core. Tension filled the control room as everyone held their breath. Finally, after hours of painstaking work, the core went dark. Cheers erupted as confirmation came through. The weapon was neutralized. But the relief was short-lived. As the team celebrated, a new transmission arrived from the Free Dominion. The message was simple yet chilling. "You have earned your survival. For now, do not mistake this for peace." Benjamin stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. "They're watching us," he said quietly. "Testing us." Laura nodded, her eyes reflecting both pride and worry. "We proved we can think creatively, adapt, and stand our ground, but they won't forget us." Sarah leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. "And neither should we. This isn't over. Not really." In the weeks that followed, humanity began preparing for the future. Defense systems were upgraded, international alliances strengthened, and research into alien technology accelerated. The encounter with the Vorthek had changed everything. It had shown humanity its vulnerabilities, but also its strengths. Benjamin found himself reflecting often on the events that had unfolded. What started as a desperate gamble had turned into a lesson in resilience and ingenuity. "We didn't win because we were stronger," he told Laura one evening. "We won because we were smarter and because we stuck together." Laura smiled faintly. "And because we used something they never expected, red tape." Sarah joined them, holding a cup of coffee. Who knew paperwork could save the planet? Maybe there's hope for bureaucracy after all. Though the immediate threat had passed, the universe remained vast and mysterious. Humanity had taken its first step onto the galactic stage, earning respect and enemies along the way. For now, Earth was safe, but everyone knew the stars hid countless dangers, waiting to test humanity once more. As Benjamin looked up at the night sky, he felt a mix of awe and determination. The battle against the Vorthek had been won, but the war for survival was far from over. And when the next challenge came, humanity would face it, not with fear, but with courage, creativity, and an unshakable belief in its ability to endure. For the first time in history, Earth stood united, ready to meet whatever the cosmos threw its way. The celebration on Earth was short-lived. While cities buzzed with joy and relief, Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah remained in their office, poring over data from the Vorthek retreat. Something about the rebels' sudden withdrawal didn't sit right with them. The rebels had claimed Earth was no longer of interest. But why? What had changed to make humanity seem unworthy of further attention? Benjamin stared at the latest satellite images, showing the remnants of the Vorthek fleet retreating into deep space. "It's too clean," he muttered. "They didn't just give up. No empire does that without a reason." Laura nodded, flipping through intercepted transmissions. "You're right. These messages are vague. Too vague. They say they're leaving, but there's no explanation for why." Sarah leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "What if they weren't really abandoning us? What if this is part of a bigger plan?" Benjamin sighed, rubbing his temples. "That's what worries me. If they're regrouping, or worse, allying with someone else, we could be walking into another trap." As days passed, reports began trickling in from observatories tracking the Vorthek ships. Some vessels had joined forces with rival alien species, sparking conflicts far beyond Earth's borders. Others seemed to vanish entirely, disappearing into uncharted regions of space. Analysts speculated that the rebels were consolidating power, preparing for a larger war against Zoreth's loyalists. But one piece of information stood out: a strange energy signature detected near the edge of the solar system. It pulsed intermittently, unlike anything scientists had seen before. Military advisors warned it could be a weapon, or something worse. "We need answers," Benjamin said during a late-night meeting. "If the Vorthek left behind some kind of threat, we can't afford to ignore it." Laura suggested sending probes to investigate the energy signature. "If we can gather more data, we might figure out what they're planning, or if they've left something behind." Sarah agreed. "And if it's dangerous, we'll have time to prepare." The decision was made quickly. A team of engineers worked around the clock to equip several unmanned probes with advanced sensors. Within days, the probes were launched, speeding toward the mysterious signal. Meanwhile, life on Earth slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could after facing an alien invasion. People rebuilt damaged infrastructure, celebrated heroes like Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah, and debated how to protect the planet from future threats. Governments poured resources into defense systems, determined never to be caught off guard again. When the probes finally reached the source of the energy signature, their findings shocked everyone. Hidden among the asteroids was a massive device, a dormant weapon capable of obliterating entire planets. It bore the unmistakable markings of the Vorthek Dominion. "They left it here," Laura whispered, staring at the images on her screen. "A failsafe, in case negotiations failed." Benjamin clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath his calm exterior. So this whole time, they were ready to destroy us if things went south. Sarah shook her head, her voice trembling. "But why leave it behind? Why not use it when they still had the chance?" "Maybe they couldn't," Laura suggested. "Their civil war weakened them. Activating the weapon might have required resources they no longer had." Whatever the reason, the discovery confirmed one thing: humanity wasn't safe yet. The team knew they had to act fast. With input from top scientists and engineers, they devised a plan to disable the weapon before it could become a threat. As work began on neutralizing the device, Benjamin reflected on everything that had happened. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge, and won. But the cost of victory was clear. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and full of dangers far greater than anyone had imagined. For now, Earth had been spared. But as Benjamin looked at the stars outside his window, he couldn't help but wonder, how many more battles lay ahead? And would humanity always find a way to survive? Or would luck eventually run out? The next morning, Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah arrived at the negotiation room with a mix of determination and unease. The atmosphere felt different this time. Charged, almost electric. When Zoreth entered, flanked by his usual aides, there was something off about him. His movements were slower, his glowing eyes dimmer, as if he hadn't slept in days. For the first time, he didn't exude confidence. Instead, he looked defeated. Benjamin exchanged a glance with Laura before speaking. "Ambassador, we're ready to proceed with clarifications on the latest proposal." Zorath hesitated, his mandibles twitching slightly. "Clarifications are irrelevant," he said, his voice low and strained. "Your tactics have made further discussion pointless." Laura stepped forward cautiously. "If there's an issue, we can adjust the terms. All we want is a fair agreement." Zorath's gaze hardened. "Fairness is a human concept, one that has no place here." He paused, then added bitterly, "You think your delays will stop us, but you underestimate the power of the Dominion." Before anyone could respond, alarms blared outside. The sound sent shivers down their spines. Everyone froze, waiting for news. Moments later, a message came through. The Vortex ship had split into two factions. Observatories confirmed that part of the fleet was breaking away, heading into deep space, while the rest remained in orbit around Earth. "What's happening?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Benjamin shook his head, his brow furrowed. "I don't know, but it's not good." Back aboard the Vortex vessel, chaos reigned. A group of high-ranking officers loyal to Zorath clashed with rebels who accused him of incompetence. The rebels argued that Earth was more trouble than it was worth and demanded immediate withdrawal. Tempers flared, weapons were drawn, and violence erupted in the corridors. The once disciplined empire descended into civil war. On Earth, military analysts scrambled to interpret the situation. General Hayes called an emergency meeting. "We need to act now," he urged. "Their division weakens them, but they're still dangerous." Benjamin held up a hand. "Wait, attacking now would unite them against us. Let's see how this plays out." As hours passed, reports poured in about the escalating conflict aboard the ship. Explosions rocked the vessel, sending debris spiraling into space. Some sections went dark, likely cut off from power during the fighting. Observers speculated that the rebels were gaining ground, forcing Zorath's faction onto the defensive. In the midst of the turmoil, Benjamin received an unexpected transmission. It wasn't from Zorath. It was from one of the rebel leaders. The message was brief but clear. "We seek peace. Withdrawal is imminent." Benjamin stared at the screen, stunned. Laura leaned over his shoulder, reading the words silently. "They're turning on each other," she said softly. "This could be our chance." Sarah nodded eagerly. "If the rebels win, they might leave Earth alone. We just need to stay out of their way." But Benjamin hesitated. "Or this could be a trap. If we trust them, and they betray us, we'll lose everything." Despite his reservations, orders were issued to stand down. Humanity watched and waited as the battle raged above them. By dawn, the outcome became clear. Zorath's forces were retreating, fleeing toward the outer edges of the solar system. The rebel faction took control of the remaining ships, broadcasting a final message. "Earth is no longer of interest to the Dominion. We depart now." As the last Vortex vessels vanished into the void, cheers erupted across the planet. People spilled into the streets, celebrating what seemed like an impossible victory. Fireworks lit up the night sky, and news anchors declared it a triumph of wit over brute force. In their office, Benjamin sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over him. Laura smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. "We did it," she murmured. "We actually did it." Sarah hugged her notebook close, grinning. Who knew paperwork could save the world? For now, humanity was safe, but as Benjamin looked out the window at the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, new threats and new opportunities awaited. The Vortex ship loomed above Earth, its massive silhouette casting a shadow over the planet below. On board, tensions were reaching a boiling point. Zorath paced furiously in the command chamber, his glowing eyes flickering with anger and frustration. Around him, high-ranking officials argued loudly, their voices echoing through the metallic corridors. The once unified empire was fracturing under the weight of delays and doubts. "They mock us," one officer shouted, slamming his fist against a console. "These humans treat us like fools." Zoreth turned sharply, his exoskeleton clicking ominously. "Silence," he barked. "We will not be undone by primitives." But his words carried little conviction. Deep down, he knew the truth. The humans had outmaneuvered them. Their tactics were infuriatingly effective, exploiting every weakness in the Vortex system. What should have been a simple resource extraction mission had spiraled into chaos, testing the limits of even the most disciplined officers. Back on Earth, Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah monitored updates from intelligence agencies tracking activity aboard the alien vessel. Observatories reported unusual energy surges and erratic movements within the ship. Whispers spread among analysts that internal strife was tearing the Vorthak apart. "It's working," Sarah said as she reviewed the latest data. "They're fighting each other." Laura nodded, her eyes scanning reports filled with technical jargon. "Their rigid structure can't handle this kind of stress. Every delay makes them question their leadership and themselves." Benjamin leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. "For now, we're winning. But if they decide to strike back, all this effort could be for nothing." As if on cue, alarms blared across military bases worldwide. Satellites detected increased activity near the Vortex ship, weapons systems powering up, engines warming, and smaller vessels detaching from the mothership. Panic rippled through governments as leaders scrambled to prepare defenses. "They're going to attack," General Hayes declared during an emergency briefing. His voice was grim but resolute. "We need to mobilize everything we've got." Benjamin shook his head firmly. "Not yet. We don't know their intentions. If we act too soon, we'll lose whatever leverage we've gained." The hours ticked by agonizingly slowly. Humanity held its breath, waiting for the Vorthak's next move. To everyone's surprise, no attack came. Instead, transmissions intercepted from the alien ship revealed something unexpected, dissent spreading among the crew. Lower-ranking Vorthak began openly questioning Zoreth's decisions. Some refused to follow orders, claiming the mission was futile. Others whispered about rebellion, suggesting it was time to abandon Earth altogether. The cracks in the Empire's foundation widened with each passing hour. On Earth, news of the Vorthak's struggles spread quickly. People celebrated cautiously, taking to the streets in cities around the globe. Social media buzzed with messages of hope and defiance. For the first time since the crisis began, humanity felt a sense of unity, not born of fear, but of triumph. In their small office, Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah watched footage of protests aboard the Vortex ship. Soldiers gathered in crowded corridors, shouting demands for change. Officers tried to restore order, but their authority was slipping away. "They're falling apart," Laura murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "All because of paperwork." Sarah grinned faintly. Who would have thought red tape could bring down an empire? Benjamin allowed himself a small smile, though his expression remained guarded. "It's not over yet. Even a wounded animal can lash out. We need to stay vigilant." As night fell, the team prepared for another round of negotiations. They didn't know what awaited them when they faced Zoreth again, but they knew one thing for certain. The Vorthak Dominion, once feared and invincible, was now vulnerable. And humanity, armed with patience and ingenuity, had proven itself capable of standing toe-to-toe with the stars. Unbeknownst to anyone, however, whispers of betrayal had begun to circulate among the Vorthak ranks. A faction within the Empire saw an opportunity, not just to survive, but to seize power. As humanity celebrated its unlikely success, darker forces stirred in the shadows, threatening to tip the scales once more. The weeks dragged on, and the strain on the Vorthak delegation became impossible to ignore. Their once imposing presence now carried an air of frustration and exhaustion. Zoreth's glowing eyes no longer radiated confidence. Instead, they flickered with irritation each time he entered the negotiation room. His aides shuffled behind him like shadows, their movements slower, their expressions blank but tense. Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah watched it all unfold with a mix of satisfaction and unease. They had successfully turned the tables, forcing the Vorthak into a maze of bureaucracy they couldn't escape. But none of them forgot that this was still an alien empire, one capable of unimaginable destruction if pushed too far. At one particularly grueling meeting, Zorath arrived clutching a thick stack of documents, his exoskeleton clicking audibly as he moved. "Your amendments are excessive," he said, his voice low and sharp. "They serve no purpose other than to delay." Benjamin leaned forward slightly, keeping his tone calm. "Ambassador, every amendment is designed to ensure transparency and fairness. If you find them excessive, perhaps we need to revisit the core principles of our agreement." Zorath's mandibles twitched, a clear sign of agitation. "Revisit nothing. We will comply, but know this delays weaken your position, not ours." Laura exchanged a glance with Sarah before speaking up. "Actually, Ambassador, delays benefit everyone. They allow for careful consideration and prevent hasty decisions that could harm both sides." Zorath stared at her for a long moment, then turned abruptly and left the room without another word. His departure left an awkward silence among the human team. "He's losing control," Laura murmured after a pause. "You can see it in the way he reacts. He's used to dominating negotiations, not being bogged down by rules." Sarah nodded. "And it's not just him. The rest of the Vorthak seem restless too. I've been reading reports. Some of their crew members are questioning why they're wasting time on Earth when there are easier targets out there." Benjamin rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "If their own people start doubting them, that could be our biggest advantage. But we need to keep pushing. One misstep, and they'll lash out." As the days passed, the Vorthak's frustrations spilled over into their internal communications. Observatories monitoring the alien ship detected unusual activity, flashes of light and bursts of energy that suggested heated debates or even conflicts aboard. Military analysts speculated that the delays were causing rifts within the Empire, weakening its unity. Meanwhile, humanity began to rally around the unlikely heroes leading the charge. News outlets praised Benjamin's calm leadership, Laura's linguistic expertise, and Sarah's analytical brilliance. Social media buzzed with memes about how paperwork saved the planet. For the first time since the crisis began, hope replaced fear. But the team knew better than to let their guard down. During one late-night strategy session, Laura voiced what everyone was thinking. "We've pushed them far, but they're still dangerous. If they decide we're more trouble than we're worth, they might cut their losses, and that could mean attacking us anyway." Benjamin sighed, leaning back in his chair. "True, but I think we've planted enough seeds of doubt within their ranks. If we can keep them tied up in negotiations long enough, they might collapse under their own weight." Sarah tapped her pen against the desk. "What if we add one final layer? Something so complex it forces them to rethink everything." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Like what? How about requiring third-party oversight?" Sarah suggested. "We could propose bringing in neutral alien species to monitor the agreement. That would introduce even more delays, and possibly allies." Benjamin considered it for a moment, then nodded. "It's risky, but worth a shot. Let's draft it." The new proposal was delivered to the Vorthak the next day. When Zorath received it, his reaction was immediate and explosive. "This is unacceptable," he bellowed, slamming the document onto the table. "You mock us with these endless delays." For the first time, cracks appeared in his composure. His glowing eyes dimmed slightly, and his voice wavered. "Enough. We will not tolerate this any longer." Benjamin met his gaze steadily. "Ambassador, we're simply following proper procedure. If you have concerns, we're happy to address them." Zorath hesitated, his mandibles twitching. Then, without another word, he stormed out of the room, leaving the humans in stunned silence. Back at the office, Laura broke the tension with a nervous laugh. "I think we just hit a nerve." Benjamin nodded grimly. Let's hope it's the right one. As the Vorthak retreated to their ship, the humans braced themselves for what might come next. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, victory felt within reach. The Vorthak delegation retreated once again to their massive ship, leaving Earth's negotiators in a state of cautious optimism. Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah returned to their office, where the air buzzed with quiet excitement. They knew they had pushed Zorath to his limits, but none of them dared to celebrate too soon. The alien empire was still powerful, and its leaders were unlikely to give up easily. "We're making progress," Benjamin said as he sank into a chair, "but we can't let up. Not now." Laura nodded, her eyes scanning the latest notes from the meeting. "Zorath is cracking under the pressure. He's starting to doubt himself, and that means others in his empire might start doubting him too." Sarah tapped her pen against the desk. "What if we push even harder? Add more steps, more requirements. Make it impossible for them to move forward without jumping through endless hoops." Benjamin hesitated, rubbing his temples. "It's risky. If we go too far, they might see it as an insult and retaliate. But if we play it right..." He trailed off, considering the possibilities. "All right, let's do it. Draft another round of amendments, but make sure they sound reasonable. We don't want to cross the line into outright defiance." Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly, crafting new clauses designed to stretch the negotiations even further. They included mandatory cultural exchange programs, requiring Vorthak representatives to attend seminars on Earth's history and values. They added environmental impact assessments, demanding detailed reports on how resource extraction would affect local ecosystems. Every new requirement was backed by references to international treaties, ensuring it appeared legitimate. When the revised proposal was delivered to the Vorthak, Zorath's reaction was immediate and explosive. During the next meeting, he slammed the document onto the table, his glowing eyes blazing with anger. "This is unacceptable," he roared. "You mock us with your trivial demands and meaningless procedures." Benjamin kept his expression neutral, though his heart raced. "Ambassador, these are standard practices. We're simply ensuring that any agreement benefits both parties equally." Zorath glared at him, his mandibles twitching. "Your delays serve no purpose. You waste our time with irrelevant formalities." Laura stepped forward, her voice steady. "These formalities protect both sides. If you prefer to skip them, we can proceed, but doing so may lead to unforeseen consequences." Her words carried a subtle warning, one she hoped Zorath would understand. For a moment, the room fell silent. Then Zorath turned to his aides, speaking rapidly in their native tongue. His frustration was clear, even to those who couldn't understand the language. Finally, he turned back to the humans. "Very well. We will comply, with all conditions. But know this, your actions have consequences." As the meeting ended, the humans exchanged uneasy glances. Zorath's tone had shifted, less angry, more calculating. It was as if he had realized something important, though none of them could guess what it was. Back at the office, Sarah leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. "Do you think we went too far?" "No," Laura replied firmly. "We gave them exactly what they asked for, a system based on rules and procedures. They just didn't expect us to use it against them." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Still, we need to stay alert. This isn't over yet. Zorath isn't the type to admit defeat easily." Over the following days, reports began filtering in about strange activity aboard the Vorthak ship. Observatories detected increased energy signatures, suggesting preparations for something significant. Military analysts warned that the aliens might be planning a strike, using humanity's tactics as justification. Despite the growing tension, the team pressed on. They continued refining their strategy, adding layers of complexity to every interaction. Each delay bought Earth more time, and sowed further discord among the Vorthak ranks. Unbeknownst to the humans, cracks were indeed forming within the alien empire. High-ranking officials argued over Zorath's handling of the negotiations, while lower-ranking crew members grew restless. The once unified Vorthak Dominion was beginning to fracture, its rigid structure buckling under the weight of human ingenuity. And so, the battle of wits raged on, with Earth holding its ground, not through force, but through patience, creativity, and an unshakable belief in the power of red tape. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah worked around the clock, responding to endless queries from the Vorthak delegation. Each clarification they provided only seemed to generate more questions, creating a cycle of delays that left the aliens increasingly exasperated. The Vorthak, who prided themselves on efficiency and order, were unaccustomed to such drawn-out processes. Their frustration was evident in every interaction, though they tried to mask it behind their stoic demeanor. Laura spent hours crafting replies, ensuring each response adhered strictly to Earth's legal frameworks while introducing subtle ambiguities. She knew these ambiguities would force the Vorthak to seek further explanations, prolonging the negotiations even more. Sarah assisted by researching obscure international laws and environmental regulations, weaving them seamlessly into the documents. Together, they turned what could have been a straightforward agreement into a labyrinth of clauses, subclauses, and footnotes. Benjamin handled the political side of things, fielding calls from world leaders who demanded updates. Some were skeptical of the strategy, urging him to take a stronger stance. Others praised the approach, seeing it as a clever way to outsmart a technologically superior foe. Despite the pressure, Benjamin remained steadfast. "We're buying time," he told anyone who questioned the plan. "Every day we delay is a day we grow stronger." Meanwhile, the Vorthak's patience began to wear thin. Back aboard their massive ship, Zorath faced mounting criticism from his own people. High-ranking officials accused him of mismanaging the negotiations, claiming his inability to secure Earth's resources reflected poorly on the Dominion. Lower-ranking crew members grumbled about the endless waiting, their morale plummeting as they watched their mission stall. On Earth, news outlets picked up on the growing tension. Analysts debated whether humanity's unconventional tactics would succeed or provoke retaliation. Public opinion shifted daily, swinging between hope and fear. Protests erupted in major cities, with some groups calling for immediate military action and others advocating for continued diplomacy. One evening, as the team reviewed yet another round of amendments, Sarah leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Do you think they'll crack soon?" Laura glanced at her, then at Benjamin. "It's hard to say, but cracks are already forming. You saw how frustrated Zorath looked during the last meeting. They're not used to this kind of resistance." Benjamin nodded thoughtfully. "And it's not just frustration. It's doubt. Every delay makes them question whether we're worth the effort. That's our advantage." The next day, the Vorthak requested an emergency session. When Benjamin and his team arrived, they found Zorath pacing angrily, his glowing eyes blazing brighter than usual. "Your constant amendments are unacceptable," he snapped. "This negotiation must conclude immediately." Benjamin raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "We're simply following proper protocol, Ambassador. If there's a specific issue, we're happy to address it." Zorath clenched his mandibles, clearly struggling to maintain control. "There are too many issues. Your documents contradict themselves. Your procedures are illogical." Sarah exchanged a glance with Laura, both trying to suppress smirks. Laura stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. "If you'd like, we can simplify the language. However, simplifying may require additional approvals from various regulatory bodies. That could take weeks or longer." Zorath froze, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, with visible effort, he composed himself. "Very well. We will review your simplifications." He turned abruptly and left, his aides trailing behind him. As the humans exited the room, Benjamin let out a low whistle. That was close. "He's losing it." Laura smiled faintly. "Good. Let him lose it. The more unstable they become, the better for us." Back at their office, The team celebrated quietly. They knew they weren't out of danger yet, but they could feel the tide turning. The Vorthex's rigid system, once their greatest strength, was now becoming their undoing, and humanity, armed with nothing more than persistence and paperwork, was proving to be a formidable opponent. Days turned into weeks as the Vortex delegation retreated to their massive ship to review the counterproposal. On Earth, tensions simmered. The initial relief of avoiding an immediate attack was fading, replaced by growing anxiety. People wanted answers, and governments were under immense pressure to act decisively. Benjamin Carter found himself juggling endless meetings with world leaders, military advisors, and public relations teams. Everyone had questions, but no one had clear solutions. Laura Bennett and Sarah Thompson worked tirelessly in a small office filled with whiteboards covered in scribbles and sticky notes. They spent hours analyzing the Vorthec language, searching for subtle cues or hidden meanings that might give humanity an edge. Laura's sharp eye for detail had already uncovered patterns in how the aliens structured their sentences, patterns that hinted at rigid rules governing their communication. She believed these rules could be exploited further, turning their own system against them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Laura leaned back in her chair and stretched. Her eyes felt heavy from staring at screens all day, but she couldn't stop now. "Sarah," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Do you remember those old reports about the Vorthec collapsing other empires?" Sarah looked up from her laptop. "Yeah, the ones where delays caused internal chaos. What about them? What if we're not just delaying them?" Laura tapped her pen against the desk. "What if we're actually destabilizing their entire system?" Sarah tilted her head, intrigued. "You mean, we're hitting them where it hurts most? Their pride?" "Exactly," Laura said, her voice gaining confidence. "Think about it. The Vorthec see themselves as superior, an unstoppable force. But what happens when they realize they've been outmaneuvered by humans using something as simple as paperwork?" Sarah grinned. "They'd hate that. It's like showing up to a space battle with spreadsheets instead of lasers." Laura chuckled softly before returning to her notes. "We need to push harder. Add more layers to the proposal. Make it so complicated that even they can't keep track of everything." The next morning, Benjamin joined them in the office, looking exhausted. Dark circles hung under his eyes, and his suit was wrinkled from days of non-stop work. "How's it going?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "We're adding new clauses," Sarah replied, sliding a stack of papers toward him. "Environmental impact assessments, mandatory inspections, trade tariffs, the works." Benjamin skimmed through the pages, raising an eyebrow. "This is thorough." "It has to be," Laura said firmly. "Every time they ask for clarification, we'll hit them with another round of amendments. The goal is to overwhelm them without crossing any lines." Benjamin nodded slowly. "All right, just make sure we stay within legal boundaries. If anyone accuses us of stalling intentionally, we'll lose credibility." As the revised proposal was sent off to the Vorthec, humanity waited nervously for their response. Days passed with no word from the alien delegation. Rumors began circulating online. Some claimed the Vorthec had left orbit, while others speculated they were planning a surprise attack. Military bases remained on high alert, and emergency broadcasts urged citizens to stay calm. Finally, a message arrived. Zoreth requested another meeting. When Benjamin, Laura, and Sarah entered the designated negotiation room, they found the Vorthec ambassador flanked by several aides. His glowing eyes flickered with irritation as he held up a copy of the proposal. "This document is unacceptable," Zoreth stated flatly. "It contains unnecessary complications and contradictions." Benjamin raised his hands in a placating gesture. "We're simply following standard procedures to ensure transparency and fairness. If there are issues, we're happy to clarify." Zoreth hesitated, clearly struggling to maintain composure. "Clarifications will be provided," he said stiffly, "but delays will not be tolerated." As the meeting dragged on, It became clear that the Vorthak were unprepared for the sheer complexity of the human response. Each question they raised led to more explanations, more documents, and more waiting. By the end of the session, frustration was etched across Zoreth's face. Back at the office, Laura allowed herself a small smile. "It's working," she murmured. "They're cracking." Benjamin exhaled deeply, leaning against the wall. "Let's hope it keeps working. Because if it doesn't..." He didn't finish the sentence. None of them needed to hear the rest. The next morning, Benjamin and Laura stood in a dimly lit conference room, surrounded by maps, screens, and stacks of documents. News outlets around the world were broadcasting live updates, showing images of the alien ship looming over New York City. The pressure was mounting. Every decision they made, or didn't make, was being scrutinized by billions of people. But Benjamin knew that rushing into anything could be disastrous. He took a deep breath and turned to Laura. "What do we know so far?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Laura flipped through her notes, her fingers tracing lines on the pages. "From what I've gathered, the Vorthak are extremely formal. Their language is full of rules and procedures. They don't just say things. They embed layers of meaning in every sentence." She paused, looking up at him. "It's almost like they expect us to follow those same rules." Benjamin frowned. "So they're not just here to demand resources. They're testing us." "Exactly," Laura said, nodding. "They think we'll either comply immediately or try to fight back. But if we play along with their system..." Her voice trailed off as she considered the possibilities. Before they could discuss further, Sarah Thompson, a young analyst assigned to assist them, burst into the room. Her face was flushed, and she clutched a folder tightly in her hands. "I think I found something important," she said, placing the folder on the table. Inside were old records and reports about other alien civilizations the Vorthak had encountered in the past. "They always start with demands," Sarah explained, pointing to a highlighted section. "But when things get complicated, they lose patience. One empire collapsed because they couldn't handle delays in negotiations. Another fell apart after their own people rebelled against endless bureaucracy." Benjamin leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You're saying their strength might also be their weakness?" Sarah nodded eagerly. "Yes, if we can bog them down in red tape, maybe we can buy ourselves some time, or even turn the situation to our advantage." Laura looked thoughtful. "It's risky, though. We'd need to create a counter-proposal so detailed and complex that it forces them to slow down. And we have to make sure everything sounds legitimate." Benjamin sighed, rubbing his temples. "Legitimate. That's going to take days, maybe weeks. The military is already pushing for action. General Hayes wants to strike while we still can." "But striking won't work," Laura interrupted. "Their technology is far beyond ours. Even if we hit them hard, they'd retaliate, and we'd lose everything." Benjamin hesitated, weighing the options. Finally, he straightened up. "All right, let's do this. Sarah, help Laura draft a response. Make it thorough. Every clause, every detail must be airtight. I'll handle the political side. If anyone asks, we're following protocol." Over the next 48 hours, the team worked tirelessly. Laura and Sarah pored over legal texts, international treaties, and environmental regulations, weaving them into a document designed to confuse and frustrate the Vorthak. Benjamin spent hours on video calls with world leaders, explaining the plan and assuring them it was the safest course of action. By the time the deadline arrived, they had crafted a proposal unlike anything the Vorthak could have anticipated. When Zoreth and his delegation returned for the next round of talks, Benjamin presented the document with a polite smile. "This outlines our terms for cooperation," he said, handing over a thick stack of papers. "We've included all relevant protocols and safeguards to ensure mutual benefit." Zoreth scanned the first few pages, his glowing eyes flickering. For a moment, there was silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, he nodded. Acceptable. We will review. As the aliens departed, Laura let out a shaky laugh. Do you think they realize what they've agreed to? Benjamin shook his head. Probably not. But that's the beauty of it. They think they're dealing with amateurs. Let's see how long their patience lasts. For now, humanity had bought itself some time. But whether their gamble would pay off remained to be seen. The stars above Earth shimmered like tiny diamonds scattered across a black velvet canvas. For centuries, humanity had gazed at the heavens, wondering if they were alone in the universe. On a crisp autumn morning, that question was answered, not with a whisper, but with a roar. A massive alien ship descended from the skies, its sleek metallic surface glinting in the sunlight. It hovered silently over New York City, casting a shadow so large it blocked out the sun for miles. People stopped in their tracks, staring upward with a mix of wonder and fear. The United Nations scrambled to respond. Within hours, emergency meetings were held in Geneva, where representatives from every corner of the globe debated how to handle this unprecedented event. The task of leading humanity's first contact team fell to Benjamin Carter, a middle-aged bureaucrat known more for his patience than his charisma. Joining him was Laura Bennett, a quiet yet brilliant linguist who specialized in decoding unfamiliar languages. Neither of them had expected to be thrust into such a monumental role, but there they were, standing on the tarmac of an airbase as the world watched. A smaller vessel detached itself from the colossal mothership, descending gracefully until it touched down on the ground. The door hissed open, revealing tall, insect-like creatures with shimmering exoskeletons and glowing eyes. Their leader, Zorath, stepped forward. His voice, transmitted through a translator device strapped to his chest, boomed loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We are the Vorthak Dominion," he declared. "Your planet holds resources vital to our survival. You will surrender control of these resources or face annihilation." Benjamin felt his stomach tighten. He glanced at Laura, whose face was pale but determined. She adjusted her glasses and took a step closer, clutching her tablet tightly. "I'm here to help us communicate," she whispered to Benjamin before addressing the aliens. We need time to understand your demands fully," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Zorath tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Time is irrelevant. Compliance is required immediately." His tone left no room for negotiation. Behind him, other Vorthak soldiers stood motionless, their weapons gleaming ominously. Back inside the command center, chaos erupted. Military leaders argued for launching a preemptive strike, while politicians insisted on finding a diplomatic solution. Benjamin found himself drowning in a sea of conflicting opinions. Every decision seemed to require approval from multiple committees, each one delaying action further. Meanwhile, reports flooded in about panic spreading across cities worldwide. People were fleeing urban centers, fearing an imminent attack. Laura worked tirelessly to decode the fragments of the Vorthak language captured during their brief exchange. Late into the night, she sat hunched over her laptop, headphones covering her ears as she replayed recordings of Zorath's speech. Something about the way he phrased his words caught her attention, a subtle emphasis on certain syllables that hinted at deeper meanings. She scribbled notes furiously, her mind racing with possibilities. "What have you found?" Benjamin asked when he entered the makeshift office. Carrying 2 cups of coffee, he handed one to Laura, who accepted it gratefully. "I think there's more to their demands than meets the eye," she replied, pointing at her screen. "Their language has layers, rules we might be able to use against them." Benjamin raised an eyebrow. "Against them? We're barely keeping up as it is." Laura hesitated, then nodded. "Exactly. But what if we turn their own system back on them?" For the first time since the crisis began, Benjamin allowed himself a small smile. Maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance after all.